Howdy, y'all. We'll get started in just a second. All right. Well, howdy. My name is Trent Whitfeld. I'm Chief of Engineering with Technologent. And I'd like to welcome you all to our joint session with Nasuni and Microsoft on how the second decade of cloud is shaping the oil and gas industry. It's really is great to have you all here today, especially spending time with us during this chaotic time. We have some great speakers lined up for you today. John Capello, a VP of Product Strategy with Nasuni, Jeff Monk, Senior Industry Executive with Microsoft, and Tom Teague, our Solutions Architect on the Cloud and Automation team with Technologent. Now, before we kick off our first speaker, let's talk a little bit some Gartner. Everyone loves a little bit of Gartner. So Simon Cushing, he's a well-respected oil and gas analyst for Gartner. He's been involved with some great reports over the years. And this is one of his quotes that I find interesting. So the aggressive ambitions or the disruptive business models that he references based on the strategic combos that we've had with our clients can really summarize into these business drivers. So we've had strategic conversations around such things as efficiency, and those conversations typically go into cost reduction through right sizing and validating the proper applications are migrated or containerized. Improving delivery times by using DevOps to instantly provision new apps when, where, how you need. When it comes to security, strategic combos around adding a little bit of governance to ensure security holes aren't opened in your environment. Combos around how we use AI and automation to gain that operational transparency. When we start having those strategic combos around risk, really it focuses on the protecting against any disruption to deliver on an always on customer experience. So we're referring to such things as disaster recovery, business continuity, ransomware protection, things like that. And then, when we talk about agility and flexibility, we're really focusing on that, the benefits of the hybrid cloud approach, right? So getting to that workload mobility piece. So the bottom line is, with the challenges that we see from these particular pieces listed, if you don't have a plan or a strategy in place, it's really hard to basically fit into a goal, right? So now I'm pretty curious on a primary challenge that your organization is facing today. So Ryan, if you don't mind kicking off that first poll for me. And as you guys are answering this poll, just a reminder that at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So this should take probably about 45 minutes-ish, so we should have plenty of time to get some questions answered. There's a section at the bottom that you can actually add those questions to the Q&A as we progress through our speakers. So, all right, I think we have enough time to see some results. Ryan, if you close that poll for me now. So no surprise here, right? Especially when it comes to this crazy COVID time, cost optimization is definitely the leading thing that we see when a lot of these conversations go to, right? So how can we be more efficient in our environments and things of that nature? Now, this actually keys off perfectly to our first speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Jeff Monk with Microsoft. Definitely one of the smart guys I know, so appreciate Jeff you being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. You want me to go ahead and share my screen?
Please do. I'm going to go ahead and stop mine, and you should be able to
Okay.
kick yours off.
Alrighty. Just give me can you see that? Can you see my screen?
No, we can't right now.
Yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Gotcha.
Okay. Great. So yeah, glad to be here. I think it's an interesting time. Just want to share a few things about our view of the world and our posture in the oil and gas industry, and what we think our customer priorities are, and then I'll talk a little bit about what some of those solutions look like, and then I'll talk a little bit about the next, I call it the next normal. So um, I think I think Satya, our CEO, said this in a recent interview, is that we've seen about 2 years of digital transformation in 2 weeks, just based on things that have been accelerated as a result of the volatility that we've seen. And it's not just COVID, it's it's some of the geopolitical things going on. So, but anyway, so let me jump in here. So our posture in the industry is really taken a pretty substantial turn towards sustainability. So we're making some significant investments in this space and developing technology to unlock some of the opportunities there, and not just go carbon neutral, go carbon negative. So I'm sure everybody on the call has some level of sustainability on their radar, and we're no different. We just I would say our position is that we want to really double down on any technologies and investments that we can make that to help that happen. And like many of you on the call, who you may be with an operator or with an oil field service company or an equipment supplier, we really depend on our strategic alliances to be able to really open up the industry and get to some scenarios that really unlock a lot of value for operators. We have a very robust partner ecosystem. So we have a lot of independent software vendors. We have system integrators. We've partnered with oil field service companies and OEMs in certain segments. And then, we also have customers that we've converted to partners. They've developed solutions that complement the technology that we're promoting, and we go to the market jointly with them. So, and then obviously the technology stack, our Azure platform, Dynamics platform, Modern Workplace, and then some of the things within those that are pretty relevant at the moment. So cognitive services, cloud edge infrastructure, a lot of activity in machine learning and deep reinforcement learning. So let me just go into what we think the customer priorities are, and this is aligned just based on all the engagements that we've had over the last several months. So obviously, cost of supply is critical. Increasing productivity, getting more out of existing assets, integrating operations, getting people on the same page when it comes to planning and decision making. And then one I think that's really critical right now that will probably resonate with you is supply chain optimization, and not just the commodity supply chain, but if you were around in 2014 and 2015 when that downturn hit, you may remember that there were tens of billions of dollars of stagnant inventory on the balance sheets of oilfield service companies and operators. So there's a lot of activity and a lot of opportunity there for us to partner with some of those types of customers to make sure that we can de-risk that. That's a high value target for us right now. Um, obviously Microsoft is an infrastructure company, so we want to bring forward the cloud. We want to bring forward technology that will unlock future value. And I would say, we're very dependent on our partner ecosystem. Like I said before, we are laser focused on outcomes that do deliver value. We have to. I think it's our responsibility with our customers to candidly distinguish between a good idea and a valuable idea. And so, when we talk about business orchestration and agility, integrating the planning cycles to reduce the amount of time it takes, and breaking down those silos between various sub-disciplines in the planning process. So if you're on the upstream side, you know that the well planning process is very fragmented. It's dominated by Excel spreadsheets and a lot of static reporting. So, we all have corporate silos that are always going to exist, and we have functional silos, but excuse me, but we can break down these sub-discipline silos and really get people working on the same page to get to our outcomes faster. And then finally, in the sustainability space, we are partnering with a lot of our customers to bring forward, the latest and greatest leak detection technology, use exception-based programs to mitigate any GHG emissions leaks. We're working on energy management scenarios to reduce the carbon footprint. This is an area that one of the things that we're seeing in oil and gas is a leaning towards power generation. The oil and gas companies want to have a play in the electrical vehicle market. So in that scenario planning, or in determining what those different business models could look like, there's a lot of different tools and applications we can use to help them do those contingency analysis and scenario planning and those kinds of things. So, when we talk about digital transformation in oil and gas, we must lead with value. So digital investments, everybody here knows that they're no longer initiative driven. They're fully integrated. They're a fully integrated part of the business, and need to demonstrate returns on any digital dollar spent. So, with guidance from our customers and partners, just showing a few of the scenarios that we've prioritized based on the engagements we're having. So at a high level, we say operate for the future. So really future proofing things in your operation. And that really cuts through a lot of the other ones too. But so health and safety, intelligent supply chain, connected operations, executive control tower, those kinds of things are really critical. And transforming the workforce is, one of the things we talk a lot about is adoption, the adoption challenge and the cultural challenge. And we all know, culture eats strategy for lunch. So when we engage the workforce, it really unlocks the adoption and, instills a level of trust in the tools that are being deployed, connected. People feel connected to the vision and the strategy of the company. So that's really what we mean by transforming the workforce, is getting people connected, getting them collaborating, and really making the world smaller. So I want to go to just talk a little bit about our partner ecosystem. So we have a really comprehensive partner ecosystem. It helps to extend the capabilities of our Azure cloud and and the technology capabilities that come with that. So we have traditional partners like Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker Hughes. We also have partners that are OEMs, like Honeywell, Siemens, ABB, Schneider, and again, GE. And then we have some newer players in the oil and gas space that have a lot of deep domain expertise that they bring to the table, and that's MANA, C3 IoT, some of these different company element analytics that are bringing forward some very specific solutions for the industry. So I wanted to just briefly talk about and sort of provoke you hopefully a little bit to think about things a little differently. So I put a few phrases up here that are pretty heavily used buzzwords or buzz phrases in this digital transformation. And I just want to counter some of those or maybe refine those a little bit to fit the current environment. So reimagine the way we work. You know, where we are now is customers are redoing the way they work. They don't have time to imagine it, they're doing it. We have, you know, we have a lot of activity going with the remote work environment and connecting people around the world. So, you know, it's the acceleration of those types of scenarios is incredible. And then, you know, discovering the art of the possible. You know, we get into these discussions of great ideas, but we really need to boil it down and distill it to what's a valuable idea, and then simplify the path to achieve that. So that's just a commentary on, you know, some of the cultural aspects of digital transformation and some of the tactical things. You know, we're in an environment where resources are not abundant, so we have to be very efficient with the types of things we propose and see to it that they can be executed. And then create the workforce of the future. I would say connect and collaborate with our existing workforce. You know, we talk about improvements and we talk about advancements. And I would say that's something that's changed here in the last few months is advancements are taking a backseat to just basic improvements. So there's a lot of focus on the basic blocking and tackling that we can do and with technology. And then building a culture of innovation really is pursuing value and ROI. It's a relentless pursuit of value, getting returns on any digital dime spent. So I'll just leave those with you. And so that's all I have. I'll pause if there's any questions or maybe send it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. You want to stop sharing? I'll get my stuff shared again. And
okay.
So a few of the things that I heard that resonate with me all related to transformation was, you know, developing the culture, right? I think that I agree with you. That's huge, and operating for the future. I think this is some pretty good things to remember from that. So Jeff, thank you for the time. That's awesome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Sure. And we'll be back at the end to do some Q&A. So Ryan, let's kick off the second poll. What oil and gas technical trends is your company involved in or wish to be involved in? I always feel like I should have like some Jeopardy music playing in the background when we do these polls. Maybe that's something I can do. I'll spare you and I won't sing, but yeah, this goes to, you know, what Jeff's referencing there, and it's really is, you know, operating for the future and what efficiencies can we add into the environment to get that cost reduced, as we've talked about before. So, all right, let's go ahead and see some results. So big data analytics and all the above. What's funny is one of the key strategies that we have in place is a data management piece, which goes a lot into the big data analytics conversations. Not surprised to see all of the above. Each of these things are pretty highly sought after when it comes to the majority of our conversations. So appreciate the insight there, gentlemen. And now it keys off perfectly when we talk about the simplification process within IT. And I'd like to introduce another one of our smart guests, Mr. John Capello with Nasuni. It's great to have you here, John. Thank you. Go ahead and stop sharing. John, you're on mute if you're talking.
Sorry about that. My apologies. No,
no worries. Now I can hear you now.
And I think I just gave you the preview of the whole deck. Sorry about that. Excuse me. Jeff, thank you so much. That was really helpful. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to come to this webinar, and really appreciate Technologent, one of our partners, our valued partners. And what I wanted to talk about was really kind of pick up where Jeff left off around the way that Microsoft has basically provided an infrastructure on which we can achieve some of these goals, particularly around cost containment. Nasuni is a file system. We're a cloud file services company. What we provide is a replacement for your traditional file infrastructure. And that replacement is built on top of Microsoft. And it's built on top of the core edge infrastructure in particular that Microsoft provides. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually walk through a little bit more specifics around the challenges specific to oil and gas that we see. We have a number of, we're very lucky to have a number of customers who are in oil and gas who are using Nasuni to contain costs, to increase collaboration. And then I'm going to talk about the Nasuni solution, and I'll talk a little bit more about some specific case studies and how our customers have been able to use Nasuni as this foundational storage strategy on which you can then achieve these other types of transformations. And in particular, I'll give you some updates on how they're doing things today in the COVID world. And then I'll pass off to Technologent, who's going to talk about once you've got that strategy in place, once you have a technology as a foundation, how then can you implement it? How can you actually make this a reality? So I'll start here. What we're seeing and the challenges that we speak to when it comes to the oil and gas space, it really starts with the size of the workloads and the fact that those workloads are across multiple locations. This is true across the industry as we see it, with upstream, midstream, downstream, whether you're a service provider. The data sets are only getting larger, and the need to be flexible about where those data sets can be analyzed or where those data sets can be ingested is changing all the time. So you need some flexibility around your infrastructure. The traditional file storage infrastructure, as well as the backup infrastructure, is one where the costs grow linearly. And what we're hearing from certainly from a lot of our customers is they want to contain unit costs. They want to be able to manage unit costs and ideally reduce unit costs over time, which is why many of them are moving to an OpEx model. Well, Nasuni gives you the ability to do all that because we are on top of a new cloud-based infrastructure, core-based infrastructure. And so I'll just kind of set up a little bit about what we replace so you get a sense of what kind of infrastructure you can put in place with Nasuni. So this should look familiar to a lot of customers. This is how you manage unstructured data and files today. You have primary storage, you've got backup software, you have separate technologies for protection from storage, you've got separate technologies for moving files to different locations, you've got separate technologies for dealing with disaster recovery. And the industry has emerged because each of these technologies had a specific purpose, and they were integrated together because no one technology could handle all of that. But this was before the cloud. What Nasuni has done, the innovation is that we've created a file system that lives on top of the object store. This is the most important part of the Nasuni solution. We allow you to take your unstructured data footprint and put it into the most durable, the most scalable, the most cost-effective file infrastructure technology available today, which is the object store. So Azure Blob Storage, this is where all of your metadata and data for your files live when you have a Nasuni volume. But you access it through edge appliances. You access it through these virtual machines or physical devices that look just like a traditional NAS. So with Nasuni, you have all the benefits of a file system, but you get the benefits of object storage in the back end and the benefits of software storage, software-defined storage on the front end. These virtual machines can be right-sized for the environment that you need to support workloads that are appropriate to, that are sized for the workloads. Disaster recovery is not something that we sell as a separate service on top of Nasuni. Disaster recovery is something that comes as a consequence of deploying Nasuni, because you can have virtual machines that interact with your file system and they can live anywhere. They could live in a second DR site. They can live, within the same data center, the same region. We make it really, really simple to take that very complex stack of stuff that we talked about before and reduce it down to a very simple stack of technologies. Nasuni on the object store and virtual machines on the edge. And let me get into a little bit more details on that before I get into how we help contain some of the costs. I won't spend a lot of time here. You can always call us and set up a demo. You can always call us and we'd be happy to talk through more details on this. But it really comes down to this. Nasuni is, again, a file system. It's on the object store, meaning Azure Blob Storage, but you access it just like you would any other kind of NAS inside of a virtual machine. It could be on-prem. It could be in Azure. You have lots of flexibility for the sizes of these because they are virtual machines. You can also purchase physical devices from us, which you can then store inside of your data centers. You're managing it through one single pane of glass, one way of accessing the logical and physical environment, being able to deploy machines, being able to deploy volumes, controlling it wherever need be. And one really important thing, especially in the oil and gas space, which is data governance becomes quite the challenge. There's data that can be collected in certain regions and data that can not leave those regions. There's data that can be collected in certain countries, not shared with other countries. So in the Nasuni world, you create a volume and you put it into a blob storage container. And that blob storage container can be in whatever region you want in the world. You access that through any VM that you can deploy anywhere in the world. You get to choose which VMs access which data centers. It is the most flexible way of dealing with complex data governance organizations and situations. And because it's one pane of glass that manages everything, the more that you scale the number of sites, the more that you scale the number of volumes, the more that you scale the size of the file system, it doesn't matter because you don't have to scale it with the same number of people. One person can manage 20 Nasuni appliances. One person, we've seen our customers, can manage 200 Nasuni appliances. The fourth thing I want to talk about is the orchestration center. So this is a service that we run, and it really does something very simple. It makes sure that any data that is accessed in one location can be shared with another location. And it can be shared so that any changes happening in one location can also be reflected in another location. We also provide something called a global file lock. And that global file lock makes sure that if I open up a file in one place, it's respected in another place. We can get into this later and probably makes more sense given the time to do a deep dive onto this at another point. But just know that we provide a system, a global file system, because we provide a way of orchestrating data between, or orchestrating the connections between different appliances. No data passes to Nasuni. You are always pushing your data from your appliance to your own object store. We don't stand anywhere in the data path, but we do provide these services to help coordinate the efforts of snapping and synchronizing data. And then finally, there's a question about big data and analytics. All of our customers are asking about this now. How can I get more insight from my data? How can I take advantage of these very robust machine learning models? How can I take advantage of easy to use out of the box platform services like cognitive services, like image analysis, like text analysis? And we have a very simple way of doing that with what we call our analytics connector. We can take data from Nasuni, a subset of that data, and then make it available to any of the Azure cloud services that are going to analyze that. I'm going to walk through this fairly quickly because I want to make sure we get to the to some of the case studies. But again, UniFS, that's our file system. The gold copy of data lives inside the object store. If there's one thing you want to take away from this presentation about UniFS, it's the fact that we are a cached file system, not a tiered file system. That means that the gold copy of the data lives up here in the object store. You access cache copies at the edge. That has so much to do with how you can take advantage of costs. And I'll just pause here for a second about that. Again, the most cost-effective storage technology out there is object storage. Your goal is to make sure you can take advantage of as much of that for as much of your unstructured data set as possible. There are two ways to do that. One is you create a file system on a device, and then you tier data off into the object store. Now, that can work in certain circumstances. It can work if You have a very clear idea about what can be tiered. It can work if you are not that concerned about what size of data lives on the edge. And you're not that concerned about optimizing so that you have a lot of stuff in the object store. But if you want to take advantage of the object store, the Nasuni approach is clearly becoming the model, the architecture you're seeing from a lot of other companies, which is, look, put everything into the object store, cache it forward. Cache it so that only what you need to be accessed on the edge can be accessed on the edge. And we've spent the last 11 years developing our caching algorithms. We have a 98% cache hit rate across all of our customers. That means 98% of the time, you're gonna get exactly the data that you need. And across the industry, we can provision smaller and smaller caches without sacrificing performance. And we're more than happy to walk through some of the examples of that, but our customers every day enjoy that. And that's the main leverage to cost containment. They get to enjoy the unit costs of object storage and manage very tightly the cost of expensive flash disk on the edge. It's also a continuously versioned file system, meaning we keep all versions here as objects in the file system. There's no separate backup technology. With a little more time, we can talk a little bit more about that. But just realize there's no backing up of Nasuni. You have all versions existing as objects inside of your Nasuni volume. Those edge appliances, like I said, they lead to in most cases, a 90% smaller footprint versus traditional file servers, 99% cache hit rate. This looks just like your system and looks just like a traditional NAS inside of your environment. I liked what Jeff had said before about, culture always wins over strategy. And that is so true. And we've found this time and again that the most important lesson in deploying Nasuni is that it's got to look just like your traditional NAS. And that's exactly what happens. When you deploy Nasuni, most of the time your users have absolutely no idea that is a different file storage underneath it, because it shows up just as a regular share. It shows up just as a regular mount. You access it just as if it were a traditional NAS. It's just that this is a really smart NAS that is constantly putting data into the cloud, out of the cloud, and intelligently doing so it can optimize for the throughput. Again, I was talking about that Nasuni management console. Just a couple things to mention here. It is not just a single pane of glass. It's also got its own REST API underneath it. This is what allows for really significant agility. And as you're moving forward, no matter what kind of technology you're looking for, make sure that they have an API first mentality for their control plane. This is something we adopted 2-3 years ago. It's something our customers really appreciate, the fact that we are first thinking about how we can get this into any changes to the control plane into a programmable environment as opposed to just having to use our UI. It provides you so much more leverage, and when it comes to being able to utilize resources and utilize FTEs to manage large and larger environments. Again, the orchestration center, this is how we manage that one file system that can be globally accessed from multiple locations. You could have one volume, it could be hundreds of terabytes, and it could exist in thousands of locations through Nasuni. All of that is coordinated through our orchestration center. And then finally, that analytics connector. So that's what actually provides the ability to take the data out of Nasuni that you want to analyze and put it into the Azure service that you want to analyze. Think of it as like a staging mechanism for an analytics pipeline. It makes it very easy to say, I want to take all of the PDF images. I want to take all of the textual images. I want to take all of the log files. I want to take all of the design files, and I want to make sure I can analyze them using the service that I need. I'm going to quickly talk about cost containment, because whether it's an exploration and production company, whether it's service provider, what we're hearing from our customers is we need to manage our unit costs. And like I was saying before, whatever architecture you're going to take on, or whatever strategy you're going to employ, make sure the foundational storage strategy is well aligned. Make sure that foundational storage strategy is already managing unit costs, and make sure that it's flexible. And that's exactly what you can expect if you've got a storage strategy that's built on object storage and one that is designed around this type of core edge architecture. Something else Jeff had talked about with the Azure infrastructure, and this is something you probably have seen in the last year with Microsoft, a real emphasis on that architectural design, core edge, critical when it comes to developing a cost containment strategy, knowing how you're going to be able to take advantage of the core and knowing how you're going to rationalize the edge. So if you have a strategy that starts with the edge and then tiers things off to the core, you've already flipped the model the wrong way. You have to start with, how do I create a stable, cost-contained core? And for us, that's blob storage. And then how do I rationalize the access points on the edge? Again, with Nasuni, with a strategy like that, or with the implementation of Nasuni, we're looking at roughly 50% cheaper than a traditional solution, whether it's multi-site file sharing, which includes a lot of synchronization between different locations, whether it's just consolidating your NAS into one volume, or whether it's using just a single site NAS solution. You put on Nasuni, you get the benefits of object storage, you get the benefits of the smaller access points, and you save a lot more money. We'll quickly skip over top here. I'll talk about, again, sort of an upstream example here. We've got a very, very large, one of the top integrated providers in the world that are using us, and they're using us because you can ingest this raw seismic data from any location. Like I was saying, you've got that flexibility around governance models about where that data can live, and flexibility about where I can then act on that data, where I want to put my HPC clusters. So Nasuni is that single file system that can be represented anywhere. The advantage is, and can handle any file size or any no limits to the actual file system. That gives you a tremendous advantage when you don't know where you can most cost effectively deploy your compute resources. So if you have if you have resources on-prem and you're looking to move them to the cloud, you can easily try them out on the cloud without having to think about how difficult it is to move the data. The easiest thing about Nasuni is just deploying an appliance and then the data becomes immediately available. And this is why a service provider like Schlumberger chose us, consolidating 500 servers across 72 locations. It becomes very, very easy to manage that growing environment. A petabyte of file infrastructure data, unstructured data, that becomes much, much easier to manage. And again, taking the advantages of object storage. The same thing with Ithaca Energy. A modern infrastructure. So a modern infrastructure that can easily ingest as much data as you need and make it available to whatever platform or whatever compute environment is most appropriate. You get a lot of flexibility because those appliances can live anywhere, which means your volumes, your data can live anywhere, which means you get to choose you have lots of flexibility around what kind of compute workloads or compute you want to put on top of that. But I get at the end here because once you get to this point of developing this cost-contained foundational storage strategy that takes advantage of core edge infrastructure, there's more to it than just that. There's a lot more to it than just purchasing a technology like Nasuni, and that's where our friends at Technologent come in, because they can take our type of technologies and then they can allow a much broader deployment and broader strategy to be fulfilled because of the services they provide. And I'm going to pause here. Oops, sorry about that. And I will hand it back to Trent.
Awesome. John, thank you very much. A couple of things that I keyed off during that whole, the simplification discussion that we had fundamentally was, reducing the complexity, and that was touched a lot of different pieces, right? That was not just, the data access aspect, it was the management pieces, the disaster recovery pieces, the orchestration pieces. So that whole reduction of complexity to even going down to the cost reduction piece that we saw, which was so critical in all of this. Speaking of that, the huge criticality related to a flexible and agile storage that would really add to that cost savings. So great prezzo, appreciate it. Let's kick off a quick poll. This is going to be really, really fast because I think we're going to speed through this rather quickly. But this keys off onto our cloud and automation practice basically beginning. So, all right, let's go ahead and see the results of it. Cloud Center are pretty good. I like that. I like that a lot. Tom, I'm going to go ahead and pass this to you. Let me see if I can get you mouse control. I might need some help from, there we go. Let's see. There we go. Tom, you should have it. If not, give me a second.
I think I have it. It says you're controlling Trent's screen. Technology
See if
win.
you, see
Thanks
if
for
you
the
can do
handoff,
it.
Trent.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, I got to click at the bottom here. Where do I advance the slides? There we go. Well, it's not working. I'll have you click through for me, Trent.
No problem.
There. Sure. So, Technologent has an approach to adopting new technologies and cultural changes within the organization around technologies such as Azure and NASUNI. We really stress governance at the outset. A lot of this is around what everyone's mentioned earlier in terms of cost avoidance. We want to set the rules of the road and establish, why we're moving things around, why we're adopting new technologies, and how we're going to do that. What tools are going to be used, what limitations are going to be put in place, how are we going to control this thing, right? From there, we roll into you can advance, Trent, our definition. This is the what. This is where we'll come in and do things like application dependency mapping, interviews with stakeholders, interviews with technology application owners, et cetera, to try and understand how your applications and technology interrelate to one another so that you have a smooth transition to a new platform, whether that's on-prem, in the cloud, or a hybrid of the two. From here, we roll into securing our infrastructure. This is the definition of your security at the front end. So the goal here is to try and pause and establish security standards and how you're going to achieve those things so that you're not circling back after deploying things and testing and finding security holes and then revisiting this again and wasting time cycling through until you're secured. We'll find it on the front end and you don't have to deal with it again later. From here, we roll into our, go ahead and advance, our architecture. We subscribe to the well-architected framework, the 5 pillars there. We'll apply that to any technology on any platform. From here, go ahead and advance, Trent. We focus on automation. Our approach to automation is something we call the as code framework. This is really establishing, the tools and operations of taking everything you do, anywhere you deploy it, and codifying it. So make everything into a code base, make that immutable, have a repository, have processes and procedures around peer reviews for those sorts of things, and have a immutable good state of your infrastructure. Should anything happen, you always have a known good state that you can roll back to. So think of technologies like Ansible, Terraform, et cetera, that can be applied to anything you do, from firewall rules to deploying networks to checking configurations. Go ahead, Trent. From here, we focus on deployment. That's just getting your workload to the right struggling for the word here, the right place that it needs to live and run. And then from here, we, go ahead, Trent, we analyze. So did it meet the objectives? Was it too costly? Did we hit our performance measures? And then we roll that into an iterative cycle where we just little by little improve the process until we are hitting our business objectives, so meeting our SLAs and also not overrunning costs. Go ahead, Trent. The stress, though, for us is at the front end doing cloud governance. So think of the alignment of people, process, technology, and knowledge to the infrastructure, security, and operations. So you want to basically establish all of the ways that you're going to consume resources in the public cloud or on your premise, and document that and make sure people are held accountable to those agreed upon metrics. And then you have a larger strategy that governance is a part of. That's the vision of your operating model. and how that aligns with your business strategy. This will eventually, morph into a maturation cycle where you're taking iterative steps and continually comparing the technology to the cloud and define the gaps that you need to cover in order to get to the next step in your evolution. So think of some of the things I like to think about when I think about governance and strategy as managing the relationship between technology and the business, communication of objectives, execution on your strategy and your operation model, developing competence in the organization. That's a big part of the cultural change that you need to undergo to achieve these goals. Enterprise architecture, security, risk management, quality assurance, and most importantly, financial planning and control, which leads me to the next slide, Trent. One of the pieces of our governance program is establishing what we call a Cloud Center of Excellence. I noticed that several of you said we have a Cloud Center of pretty good, and we're very passionate about how this is structured and how this is laid out to have a series of stakeholders that, where the focus is accountability. How do we drive accountability for every team to where they're bought into the overall strategy and held accountable to deliver the cost controls that come with that, the outcomes that come with that. You'll see in the lower left, we have the financial analyst. I wish I could have highlighted that guy. He's probably one of the most critical players here, and he can establish, what cost controls are we putting in? Are we meeting the objectives of monitoring those cost controls? Is tagging in place, et cetera, and tying that back to, business value. So is this particular sub-application over here producing the business value that relates back to its cost? Is it costing more than it's, producing? Do we need to lower its service level in order to get its costs under control and still meet business objectives, right? One other thing that's not necessarily visualized here is we also like to pull in, I guess, a representative from various, what we'll call former business silos or technical silos, rotate in and out who represents each team and each technology into the Cloud Center of Excellence. So everybody within the organization can feel like they're a part of the change and they're going to be committed to the outcomes, and they're not an outsider that fears the change or is afraid that it isn't going to be successful or there's a wrench in the works. This is a big piece, the Cloud Center of Excellence, of cultural needle forward within your organization to achieve your outcomes. It was mentioned earlier how critical that is. Culture rules all, and I think this is probably the most critical piece of our governance program for cloud adoption. Go ahead, Trent. This leads to something we call FinOps, and a lot of FinOps is taking that financial analyst that you saw and understanding costs, driving accountability of those costs back to the business. How do we track these things, right? Develop a really strict tagging strategy. I don't know how many of you have been involved in this, but I have a customer who looks to the technical team to establish the tagging strategy. They don't have a Cloud Center of Excellence. The technical team says, we don't know what this is for. We've moved this data set into the cloud and we have 20% of it. We don't know who owns it in the business. That's not a tagging strategy. That's not having everyone in the business accountable for what they're using and what they're consuming and what they should be paying for. And that's where the financial analysts and FinOps comes into play. You can strictly define every piece of your infrastructure, whether it's living on-prem in the cloud, at a service provider, et cetera, who are the consumers of those resources, and charge them back appropriately so that this financial analyst can say, business strategy X consuming resources Y is paying for itself or not, or we need to take a different approach, right? Trent, go ahead and click forward here. And then, this is a microcosm of all the offerings we have, but I did want to focus on automation as it relates to tying all these things together. This goes back to the as-code framework that I mentioned before, and it doesn't have to be a, all or nothing buy-in. You can take a small approach to this and establish the process to say, hey, maybe first we're going to establish our security rules, firewall rules, or, security group rules within the cloud or something of that nature. Can we develop a process where any change to those rules is reviewed by a change control board and then, approved through a service management platform and implemented, and then every evening those rules are checked against that standard to see if there's drift, to see if someone went in and manually changed something. And then even if you're very brave, you can say, okay, if there is drift, let's just reapply only the approved rules and then circle back and iterate again. So now we've established this process. Do we improve the process? Do we expand it to other realms of our deployments and get that stride for documented, immutable repository of our world, and build and build and build from there until your entire organization is automating by nature. Everything's done in code. No one's clicking around on GUIs to get stuff done. Really leads to the ability to deploy things like in the next slide, Trent. You may have recognized something similar to this from John earlier on the NASUNL side. Think about taking all of these pieces of data and writing automated processes around them, okay? So you ingest a bunch of data from an exploration site and a drilling site, some seismic images, some logs, etc. And when that data set reaches the NASUNL up in Azure, a notification gets sent to a geophysicist. That geophysicist launches a data crunching job and loads that data into a Cosmos DB up in Azure, right? And the population of that tool or data set launches a notification to an analyst in Amsterdam. As you can see, I'm trying to color code these things. And that analyst takes yet more data from the NASUNL system and what's built in the unstructured database and slams it into Power BI and does some crunching there and produces his golden egg. And when that's ready, the boss man gets to view that. And all of these automated systems allow massive time savings for one, but also repeatable processes and, the spin down or sunsetting or mothballing of some of these things. You may say, let's keep that NoSQL database around for a week and then we'll trash it and throw it away when we're done. Let's repeat that same run again and tweak one thing, and we only have to pay for the compute while the run is going, and then we turn it off. That's one of the great advantages of using the, hyperscalers up in the cloud, such as Azure, right? And one of the things I will say is, in a previous life, I used to run a system very different from this, but it was file services around the world. We had independent NAS systems spread all over the globe, and we had to do HPC number crunching across the globe, and we kept running applications and systems that would move data all over the place just to get the job done every day. And it was error prone. There were humans involved in moving data around and selecting things and getting the work done, and there was heavy cost to duplicating that data all over the planet. We didn't really have a global file system. A lot of vendors you'll hear say we have a global namespace or a global file system, and that's a misnomer because they're talking about it in a single site, or they're talking about it only as an object storage platform without file services layered on top, which is, as John alluded to, a little bit more difficult to adopt when you can just give them a NASUNL appliance, which I think is very unique in the industry, and it gives you one single global file system that everyone interacts with universally. It all appears to be in one place, even though it may not be. I think that's a huge game changer. I think it would have made my previous life a lot easier, but certainly the cost advantages are there for single instancing a lot of this stuff. I see, Trent, we're getting a little short on time, so I'll let you pop me into my last slide here. This is our Technologent architecture method. Really represents our approach to tackling any of these, initiatives. We really focus on the why, the what, and the how. the big focus being, let's establish rules of the road. Let's make sure all costs are controlled at the outset so that when a project gets going, we prevent it from getting off the rails on budget. If you blow your budget within the first 2 months of a 6-month project, what's going to happen to your project, right? And then from there, you can see kind of a brief menu. It's certainly not limited to this, of all the things we offer in our program. Some of that is focused on financial controls and costs management. And we'll do things outside of this sphere that may not be listed here, like try and apply artificial intelligence or, big data with some automated controls on it in some cases to a data set where you have an idea from a business perspective to say, we have this data over here, I know there's value in it, and I want to ask it this question. We can build those things out as well. Just reach out to your, Technologent counterpart, your account executive, and get us engaged. We'd love to have those conversations. Trent, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. As usual, always a pleasure to hear from you, brother. So thank you very much. So
absolutely,
I'll blow through this for just a second, and we'll open up for Q&A. We'll see if we have any questions. But it's if I were to pose a question, how comfortable are you with your cloud journey or your IT transformation? If you had to apply that number of 0 to 100% comfortable, what would your answer be, right? And if your answer is I'm not 100% comfortable, well, what's preventing you from getting to that point, right? What strategy or plan hasn't been defined to help you achieve that goal? If we think of it as a puzzle, maybe what missing puzzle piece is preventing you from getting to that point? Perhaps it's one of these. So Technologent has expertise in each and every one of these, and then some, right? And as Tom mentioned and as John mentioned, Technologent is an integrator, and so we're fundamentally the glue that puts the disparate technologies together to provide that holistic solution. Now, so as a solution provider, we're here to help develop the plan or strategy based off your goals. Working with great partners like Microsoft and Nasuni, we know how to position every piece to make sure we complete the puzzle and make sense of the chaos. So fundamentally, make that uncomfortable journey of transition or change comfortable and absolutely make sense of that chaos. So I invite you to continue the conversation with us, get a detailed mapping of what the framework looks like for your specific site. It leads to so many conversations, as Tom mentioned, on the right-hand side, from cloud migrations all the way down to basically how automation can impact your environment, right? We'd heard from Tom today, but there's plenty of other members on a cloud and automation team that, across the country, really, that we can work with on different things. And so different areas of expertise. Ryan Hooley is our practice director. Talk to these guys about, getting a demo set up with the Nasuni, the Microsoft side, how we position each and every one of those great technologies together, that holistic approach. Get a technical deep dive on those, right? See what a POC looks like in your environment. It's understand what a workshop and an assessment actually would do for you. And I'm happy to make that love connection. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I'm Trent at Technologent.com. My last name is Atrocity, so they were nice enough to give me an alias. But yeah, if you have anything you want me to talk, any additional feedback or follow-up you need, happy to make that transition for you. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. And let me go to that piece because I don't even know. We might have been answering them as we went through. All right. Well, no questions is good questions, right? When it comes to the times that we have today, we really appreciate you all spending the minutes with us. I know we ran about 5 minutes longer than I wanted to in terms of opening up for questions, but I know it's timing of the essence for everyone. So thank you to everyone that was able to join us today. Thank you to our speakers, Jeff, John, and Tom. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys.
Hold up. We got a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Are there any volume size limitations with Nasuni, John?
There are no volume size limitations. So, or as I like to say, as long as Microsoft keeps giving us objects, we'll keep increasing the volume size. So to date, they have not put a limitation on that. And so we don't put a limitation on volume size or file size for that matter. So, incredibly large log files, really large seismic data, all that stuff is not a problem on us.
Awesome. Hey, Tom, we got a question for you now. when it comes to the framework, is it too late to engage depending on where you are within the framework?
Absolutely not. We are just as happy to pick up the ball where you are, as well as do things like governance definition in line while we're trying to sprint certain initiatives forward. A lot of people see the absolute business value of getting to Azure and that ecosystem of great toys and tools that accelerate your business. We get that too, and we can do in arrears some of those cost management, governance, rules sort of things, as long as there's a commitment to do so. Otherwise, as we all know, you're going to run into that, skunk work stuff where costs are getting out of control. So we can do both in tandem. It's just a matter of how we structure the project.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen and folks, if you have any other questions, feel free to lay them to me and I'll pass them off to the team and we'll get back to you. But well, we appreciate the time, and this final slide where we get the nice little thank you. So again, thank you to our speakers, Jeff, John, and Tom. And I hope everyone stays healthy and safe. And I hope to see you all in person sooner rather than later. I would love to sit down with each and every one of you. So until then, don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you again, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.